Microscopic Milton is very small indeed. He lives in a clock on the mantelpiece in the parlour of a house that belongs to a lady named Mrs. Witherspoon. No one knows he's there, apart from Milton's friend Douglas, who spends most of his time asleep in front of the fire, and, of course, you. Milton had been spring cleaning his clock all day, and it was almost tea time as he finished the last spot of dusting. In the parlour, Douglas was half asleep in front of the fire as usual, and Mrs. Witherspoon was reading the evening newspaper. "Oh, look," she said suddenly. "There's going to be a dog show at the village fete on Saturday." Douglas opened one eye suspiciously. "You're a very handsome dog, Douglas," she said. "I'm sure you could win first prize at the show." "It's a beautiful silver trophy with the winner's name engraved on it. That would look lovely on the mantelpiece. Of course, I'll have to move that old clock. I'll put it in the attic, out of the way." "The attic?" thought Milton. "I can't live in the attic. It's dark and cold and full of cobwebs and spiders." "I'm going to enter you for the show right away," she said, and went off to telephone the organisers. "Did you hear that?" shouted Milton as he walked to the edge of the mantelpiece. "She's going to put me in the attic if you win the dog show prize." Douglas didn't seem too worried. Mrs. Trimble's poodle always won first prize, so why should this year be any different? The day of the village fete arrived, and Mrs. Witherspoon was getting Douglas ready for the dog show. She gave him a nice warm bath with her best soaps, shampoos, and bath salts. She dried him thoroughly with the hairdryer. She made him smell as sweet as a rose, and brushed his hair till he shone. "There," said Mrs. Witherspoon when she'd finished. "You're the most handsome dog I've ever seen. You're bound to win the first prize." Douglas almost had to agree, but he was still sure that Mrs. Trimble's poodle would win the trophy. Unfortunately, when they reached the village fete, Mrs. Trimble and her poodle were nowhere to be seen. "We've had a very poor turnout for the dog show this year," the judge explained to Mrs. Witherspoon. Sure enough, there were only 2 other dogs in the whole show, and without being too unkind, it was fairly certain that Douglas was going to win. "Oh, dear," sighed Milton. "Compared to those 2, you are the handsomest dog in the world." Suddenly, Milton had an idea. He stood on the top of Douglas's head and blew the biggest raspberry he could at the other dogs. Douglas, it may be a good idea to run away," said Milton helpfully. So Douglas did. "Quick," shouted Milton, "hide in here." No, in here." "Try in there." Eventually, the dogs stopped chasing Douglas, and they all returned to the dog show just in time for the judging to begin. To everyone's surprise, Douglas didn't win first prize. In fact, he came last. Milton and Douglas were smelly but happy, because Milton's clock could now stay in its proper place on the mantelpiece. And best of all, the third prize was a year's supply of Douglas's favourite dog biscuits. Much tastier than a silver trophy, he thought, as they set off towards home and a nice warm bath.